Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our condensed ANZAC commemorative service for 2022. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land which we are gathered and pay my respects to the elders both past, present and emerging.
My name is Frances Cano and I am head girl of Gosnells Primary School. The voice you just heard was head boy Hamish Edmonds. We will be the master of the ceremonies for this service. We are here today to respect the young people of Western Australia as we remember those who bravely fought and tragically died in the war. This commemorative service helps us to make connections between the past and our own lives. It gives us the opportunity to reflect upon the sacrifice fellow Australians have made to enable us to live in peace and experience a lifestyle of privilege and equality.
Our school has a long tradition of commemorating ANZAC Day. The tradition of ANZAC Day was formed on the battlefields of Gallipoli and then the Middle East, France and Belgium. It has continued today where Australian troops are serving in many countries around the world.
Each year, classes at our school are involved in studying the ANZAC tradition. As part of our ANZAC studies, Room 2 have looked at what life was like in the trenches for our ANZACs. We will all now watch some of our Year 6 students present their ANZAC poems, which will depict life in the trenches and the way we commemorate their sacrifice.
ANZAC stood upon the shore, watching as midnight fell. Night came upon the men as they waited for what felt like eternity. Zealanders and Australians fighting together to protect the land they loved. As the sun rose, all was quiet. Many had died and others lay wounded. Carnage and bloodshed we will never forget, but we look forward, so we say lest we forget. Day by day, night by night, the war went on as blood covered the land. As the war came to an end, peace came to the world, though there were still many disputes among the powers of the world. Yes, almost everyone got over the war, but we will never forget, so we say lest we forget.
For those who had their hearts broken and those who had loved ones taken, for those who lost friends and those who had messages to send, for those who lived together and those who were fragile like a feather, for those who kicked the bucket and those who launched the rockets, for those who got carried and those who got buried, for those who remember the scene and those who died for the team.
In Flanders Fields the poppies grow, between the crosses row on row. Young soldiers all dying, all their families were crying. Yelling and screaming, there was no help, even when people yelped and yelped. They all defended their country with pride, although they soon started to die. Thousands of bullets flying by, soldiers fighting side by side. All those ANZACs arrived in Gallipoli 1915. The soldiers had never witnessed such a rough scene. Once they landed on the shore, they knew they were about to go to war. The whole army was ready, all walking slow and steady. This is why every April 25th we say, lest we forget, to the people who risked their lives to save ours, lest we forget.
We would now like to introduce Mr. John McPherson, who will share his ANZAC experience in the following video he prepared for us. This speech was filmed at ANZAC House in the city.
At around 4:30 am on the 25th of April 1915, the first soldiers of the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps landed in the Burnie area on the Gallipoli Peninsula. On the same morning, soldiers from Britain, France and their colonies launched assaults at nearby Cape Helles and Cumkale. At the time, the Allies wanted to destroy the Turkish forts overlooking the Dardanelles, so their ships could enter the Sea of Marmara and bombard Constantinople, now Istanbul, the capital of the Ottoman Empire. They hoped this would force Turkey's surrender, ease pressure on Russia, and deprive Germany of a major ally. Historians estimate that some 2,000 Australians were killed or wounded on the 25th of April, but there are no precise casualty figures for that day. Corporal Jason Colber of the 8th Battalion, originally from Ballarat, landed in the second wave with the 8th Battalion. Coulter wrote on account of the fighting in his diary in 1915, and this is from his diary. Landed at Gallipoli Peninsula, Gabatepe, on Sunday the 25th of April under heavy shell and rifle fire. Got straight into action, and it was hell. God how the shells poured over us while the bullets from the enemy rifles poured into us. What a day of sorrow, men shattered to pieces, and oh the sight and the sorrow. Poor fellows left out on the field to die all through a wet cold night. Many missing this morning, officers dead. God knows how many left tonight, but we must go on and on till we beat them. Like many of the ANZACs, Jason Coulter did not survive Gallipoli. He died of gunshot wounds on the 10th of August 1915. For 8 months, the ANZACs hung on to their positions on the ridges and gullies above ANZAC Cove. They could not go forward, but the Turks could not force them back into the sea. In December 1915, the ANZACs were evacuated. By then, about 8,700 Australians and 2,700 New Zealanders had been killed. In total, at least 130,000 Allied and Turkish soldiers died as a result of the Gallipoli campaign. Now, I drew most of this information by Googling ANZAC Day speeches on the internet, and these stories form the basis for the men and women we remember each year on the 25th of April. They certainly resonate with me, but don't form the entirety of my thoughts on ANZAC Day or Remembrance Day. Those thoughts are taken up with memories of the people I've served with over many years in the Australian Army and in many and varied places. People like mates I served with at the first psychological operations in Nui Dat, South Vietnam, or what was then South Vietnam. And those I've served with in Timor-Leste, the Solomon Islands, Iraq, Afghanistan, Turkey and Malaya. They're the people I think about at these times, along with their predecessors, but the ones I mourn or think about are the ones I knew personally. Luckily, most of those I've known have all come home to their families. Maybe far more worldly wise, but nonetheless they made it home. Which brings me to another point that I believe in very strongly, and that is the families we leave behind. The wives, husbands, children and relatives who have to keep the home fires burning. When we're away serving our country, they have to continue with the car trips to school or netball or footy and make sure everything keeps functioning at home. And all the time while worrying about our health and safety throughout our deployments. They're the ones that should be getting the medals. We're simply following the orders of our commanders, whether that be a corporal, sergeant or general or whoever is our immediate boss. Not much thinking to be done except to do what we're directed to do to the best of our ability. But back home our partners are having to work out what needs to be done and when and how best to achieve it. And when you've got 4 kids like my wife Sue and I, our first child turned 1 2 days before I arrived in Vietnam, those timetables can take a lot of juggling. So that's where I believe the medals or similar recognition should be going. But getting back to the dangers that come with serving your country, when I first arrived in Afghanistan in early August 2010, we lost 3 Australian soldiers in the first 2.5 weeks I was at our base at Tarankot. 1 to a sniper and 2 to improvised explosive devices. It's extremely hard to explain the grief and loss of morale that occurs at these times, and it takes considerable effort to get back on the horse, so to speak, and do your job properly without your missing mates. However, we're all specialists in our particular areas, and that's what we have to do. Strangely enough, even at times when least expected. I have a photograph taken of myself with 2 corporals and a retired major taken at Gallipoli in 2008. The retired major was Jack Thurgood, who was conducting the I Am an Australian Soldier Scholarship Program, and the 2 corporals were the scholarship winners, John Morrison and Cameron Baird. 5 years later, Cam was killed in a firefight in Afghanistan and later posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross for his gallantry. So they're the people, along with the veterans from the 2 world wars, who I think of mostly on ANZAC Day, and express my gratitude to for the sacrifices that they and their injured colleagues made for me and my family so we can enjoy the wonderful lifestyle that we know and love here in Australia. Another memory that comes to mind is when I was in Iraq, and we had a dawn service on top of the bombed-out Sunni political headquarters in Baghdad. The state of unrest surrounding the Sunni and Shia Muslims of Iraq is due to politics, power and privilege, caused by the change of attitude in Islamic leaders in government and the discrimination of the Shia by the Sunni minority. However, in the very dark pre-dawn light, we had to climb 7 flights of slightly broken stairways to reach the top of the building. There in the half light, we remembered our former colleagues and mates as we commemorated the meeting of ANZAC. It was without doubt the most memorable dawn service in which I participated. And with that, I'll conclude this address and thank you for listening, lest we forget.
The Gosnells Primary School students will now join in singing Lest We Forget. This will immediately be followed by the poem in Flanders Fields, written by John McCrae, read by Mrs. Johnson.
In Flanders Fields the poppies blow, between the crosses row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead, Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders Fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe, to you from failing hands we throw the torch, be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders Fields.
We are now going to prepare for the most solemn part of our service. We will now participate in a time of reflection as we listen to the Ode and the Last Post, followed by a minute of silence.
At the conclusion of the reflection period, we will listen to the rouse. Following rouse, Miss Johnson will lead the school in singing the national anthem. Please stand.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free, with gold and soil and wealth for toil. Our home is girt by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty rich and rare. In history's page let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Please be seated. That concludes our service.
We would like to take this opportunity to thank you all for your respectful participation in our service. Students, please listen to your teacher's instructions.